If we're talking about teams that could, maybe exceed expectations, go 8-4, something like that, have a really solid year. I think Auburn's right there in that mix. And then if I were to throw one more out there for you, I'm interested.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Holmes Field Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Holmes, and today I'm bringing you a little bit of a more unique episode. Today, we're just going to focus on our Guest of the Week segment of the podcast. So that's right, no SOS, no bold predictions of the week, but don't worry, it'll be coming back soon. Just a little bit of a longer interview today I want to go over. A special guest, Conrad Van Order. He is part of the three-man front show on WJOX 94.5 on the weekdays here in Birmingham, Alabama. So we're going to dive right in.
Holmes Field Advantage.
And welcome into the Guest of the Week segment of the podcast. Today I'm joined by Conrad Van Order of Three Man Front on WJOX 94.5 on the weekdays. How you doing today, Conrad?
I'm doing good, Wesley. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Awesome to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about the SEC, and obviously still a few months out from the college football season, but kind of the first thing I want to look at is what teams in the SEC that maybe aren't at the forefront of everyone's minds or people not talking about that they should be and why.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I guess we can start off at the top and a team that I think people are aware of now, but they don't seem to be getting the same buzz that a lot of these other schools are, would be Ole Miss for me. And I think with Ole Miss, they made it one game away from playing for a national championship last year. And I think there's a lot of fair questions to be asked about Pete Golding now that he's not going to be, calling the defense, and he's going to be focusing more so on the head coaching duties, and does that side of the ball fall off for them a little bit? But you're bringing back the best quarterback in the SEC, one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. They are going to have to restock at some key positions like wide receiver. But I think Cade Cunningham is going to be a household name in the SEC by the end of the year. You probably got the best running back coming back as well in Kewan Lacey. So I feel like the offensive side of the ball is going to be business as usual for Ole Miss. Even without Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr., they're calling the plays on that side of things. It's just a lot of it's the defense for me, and how can they, live up to what they've been the last couple of years when they really were a strong suit at times for Ole Miss. But it's just kind of surprising for me that a team that, like I said, they were one game away from playing for national championship last year. A lot of people just kind of writing them off as, oh, that's great, but they're not Texas or Georgia or LSU with a lot of the attention now, or even like a Texas A&M, like a team that I think has a lot of question marks coming into this year if they can repeat the success of last year. And they seem to be getting more of the benefit of the doubt than somebody like an Ole Miss there. I think some of the other schools, I really do think Auburn, maybe not in terms of competing right now to win the SEC or to make a college football playoff or anything in year one for Alex Golesh. But I really do like the direction that program's heading in. I think Byron Brown's going to be potentially the best quarterback that they've had in a decade plus, even though I know some people were worried about the spring game and how that may have looked. But I like Auburn defensively with DJ Durkin and Xavier Atkins and a lot of those guys coming back. I think they're going to be in really good shape. It's just a question of, can the offense, where you're going to have 10 of your 11 projected starters transferring in to the program, how quickly can they gel? But, the good thing is a lot of those guys came from South Florida, so they already know how to play together and they know Golesh and the system pretty well. So I think Auburn's another team that, again, not saying they're going to win the SEC or anything, but if we're talking about teams that could, maybe exceed expectations, go 8-4, something like that, have a really solid year, I think Auburn's right there in that mix. And then if I were to throw one more out there for you, I'm interested in Missouri a lot because I think Missouri's turned into a really solid program the last few years with Eli Drinkwitz. A lot of schools maybe didn't come after him this offseason, but had him as kind of like a backup plan. And Missouri gets to keep him and keep him locked up there. But, you bring in Austin Simmons, who before getting injured last year, and I know he had some turnover problems earlier in the year, and then Trinidad Chambliss took over, and that was all she wrote. We all remember how he played when he had to come in against Georgia a couple years ago for Ole Miss, and we're like, man, this guy's going to be the next big thing after Jackson Dart, and it didn't go that way for him last year. But I think he should definitely be better than Bo Pribula at that spot for Missouri. You've got Ahmad Hardy coming back, who right there with Kewan Lacey, probably the best top two running backs in the SEC. I think defensively that they've made some good strides. and what they've been able to bring in, getting a guy like Damon Wilson to come over in the transfer portal, one of the best edge rushers as well. So I'm interested in Missouri because I think that's another sneaky game or another sneaky team where maybe not going to win the SEC or compete for anything like that, but we might be looking up at the end of the year and go, man, they went 9-3 again, or 8-4, and they get to a bowl game and win it, and go 9-4 or something, and it'll just be another solid year for Drinkwitz. So I think those are probably three teams that right now for me in the conference, I think are maybe not getting enough buzz and are going to be really, really solid teams this year.
Right. And with each of those three teams, you at least brought up the portal once, whether it was somebody that they gained or lost. And I want to focus on Ole Miss. You talked about them.
Yeah.
So obviously the reason people are going to maybe overlook them a little bit is because Lane Kiffin isn't there. So how much did they get saved a little bit by Trinidad Chambliss staying, by Kewan Lacey staying, a decent bit of the coaching staff being retained? How much did that save the Rebels?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can overstate enough how much of a difference having Trinidad Chambliss comes back as opposed to, they got Deuce Knight in, the former Auburn backup, and he looked really great last year in the one game that you saw him against Mercer, but that's different than, a full SEC schedule. But I mean, I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC. I don't really think there's a strong argument for anybody else going into the year. Now at the end of the year, maybe Arch Manning continues to develop, and some of these other guys. We'll see what Alabama rolls out at quarterback that could challenge for that. But right now, I think he has to be the clear front runner at that position, and we know that's the most important position, right? Kewan Lacey probably going to be a first-round pick there offensively, and that's the Ole Miss bread and butter, right? You're going to have different coaching staff, different guys calling the plays, but I wouldn't expect it to look all that different. But yeah, getting those two guys back for Ole Miss is massive. And in particular, you're just going to need some guys to step up around them, but if Trinidad Chambliss wasn't coming back for Ole Miss, I wouldn't have just been talking about them as somebody that I think is somehow flying under the radar, even though they were, proved to be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in all of college football last year. But that was absolutely massive for them, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see them. And I think we're going to figure out a lot about that team very early on because I know one of the things I think you want to talk about is some of the most intriguing matchups coming up, and we can do that more later. But that Ole Miss and LSU game early on in the season, I think a lot of people are going to circle that as maybe the must-watch game in the SEC because of all the storylines and everything going on with Lane, obviously. But that'll be a good measuring stick for Pete Golding and this team. But I'm really high on Ole Miss, so we'll see if they can live up to the expectations now that they finally made it to a postseason and accomplished some things. But yeah, getting Trinidad back, that might have been the biggest move for any one team in college football, or at least in the SEC this offseason.
Right. One thing I'd love to see is the what the alcohol sales are going to be for that LSU Ole Miss game. I think it's going to be through the roof. But
absolutely,
talking about some of the matchups for this season, there's going to be LSU Ole Miss. That's on the top of everyone's minds just because of the Lane Kiffin controversy. Obviously, the Iron Bowl is always prevalent. Auburn, Georgia, just so many great rivalry games in the SEC. What are maybe some games that is falling under? You've talked about a Missouri, and are they matching up with somebody you said this might impact the SEC race more than people think? Not just Missouri, but just anybody.
Yeah, anybody. That's a good question. As I try to pull up the full graphic here of all the games, because it's so hard to keep up with how many different games you have going on this early in the season. I mean, an easy one, kind of a gimme, right? Is you're going to have Alabama and Georgia. That game's going to be in Tuscaloosa in October, and I think we feel really good about Georgia going in, but. Now with Alabama, right, that was always kind of the game you could point to and go, well, they're just going to figure out a way to beat them because of how great their recent success has been. But now after the SEC championship game last year, and I know Alabama was pretty beat up in that matchup, but with Georgia winning the way that they did, I know for a lot of Georgia fans, it was that final vindication of like, okay, maybe we got that monkey off our back. And so for Alabama, that's going to be a huge game for them, obviously, as they're trying to get back to a playoff. And people, maybe expectations are a little down for them compared to what we're used to seeing. So that's going to be a massive one. Just kind of looking at some of the early games, the same weekend that you have LSU and Ole Miss, I think Florida and Auburn, down on the plains, that's going to be a really, really interesting matchup there. And maybe for Auburn fans, that's one of those you really want to win because it's like, oh, we made the right call. We got the guy that we really wanted and talking yourself out of, well, we really wanted John Summerall. Well, if you win that game, right, that's the vindication that, well, Alex Golesh maybe was the better hire than John Summerall was. And the same thing for Florida. That's one of those games that if you want to get back to, where Florida expects to be in the SEC pecking order and in that top tier, you're going to have to be able to beat, the Auburns of the world on a consistent basis. And they just haven't been able to do that for a number of years there. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one for both of those programs. You've got Oklahoma at Georgia in late September as well. Oklahoma is kind of a weird one for me. I know a lot of people are really, really high on Oklahoma, but I know John Mateer got hurt early last year in the Auburn game, and people kind of wrote off a lot of his struggles after that because he's never fully healthy. But I think going up against a full SEC schedule, again, what if he gets hurt again, right? That could be a problem for Oklahoma if that's just, kind of going to be the way that his SEC career goes. I know on the defensive side of the ball, they've got a lot of really good players coming back, but they also lost a lot of really good players. And that's, why they made the postseason last year was because of that defense. But that's a team that if you beat a Georgia, right, it's just like with Alabama, right? If these teams, like your Oklahomas, your Texas A&Ms, even Texas to a certain degree, like you kind of need to see them win those games in the regular season to feel like they have a chance to compete, when it comes postseason time. And that could be another really, really good game there. You got Red River with Texas and Oklahoma, which is always a lot of fun as you're just kind of going down the schedule and looking at some of the different matchups that you have looking here. LSU at Auburn, that's another interesting one. Lane Kiffin doesn't have a great track record against Auburn in his career. And that seems like that would be a perfect place for, him to kind of fall on his face right in year one and have LSU fans all kind of in a tizzy after something like that. So those would be some of the ones just kind of off the top of my head going down the list here of, some of those are, the marquee matchups, obviously, that everyone's going to be excited for, Alabama, LSU, games like that as well. But I think those are some really, really interesting ones along the way that'll kind of tell you a lot about different teams and where they are at different points in the season, at least early on, because a lot of those are in the first kind of half of the season.
I would agree 100%. And you brought up a couple of the new coaches in the SEC, obviously. Just the world we're in college football, every year there's 10, 15 new head coaches across the power conferences. So I just kind of want to go maybe coach by coach. Of the new coaches in the SEC, what is success for them? Like, what's bare minimum where the fan base is off of them for a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, well, we can start with Ole Miss and Pete Golding. I guess that technically counts, even though he got a couple playoff games under his belt.
He's playing with house money at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for him this year, getting back to the playoff would make people feel really good. I think even, let's say, because we're still in the 12-team playoff, a couple years ago, I guess it was 2 years ago, when you had Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, they were all like the first three teams out of the playoff that year. I think even if you're in that realm for Ole Miss, like you still got to feel pretty good that the thing's headed in the right direction. Maybe you feel like you wasted that extra year of Trinidad if you don't get back to the playoffs. But I think 9-3, 10-2, anything in that area, I think Ole Miss fans would be pretty happy with that. As far as he goes for a first-year coach. Let's see, who else do we have here? John Summerall, we talked about him with Florida for a minute there. I think Florida's tough because their schedule's going to be a little tricky as well. I think for Florida and even kind of Auburn, maybe you can lump them in the same category. I think 7-5 for both of those programs shows you progress. 8-4 makes you feel really good. So I think 7-5, getting to a bowl game, if you can win a bowl game and go 8-5, because that saved Napier's job, right? 2 years ago, gave him last year before he got fired. It was, that stretch they went on at the end, won a bowl game. People feeling really good about them. And then, last year didn't go as planned, obviously. And that's why we're talking about them having a new head coach. But I think, for both Auburn and Florida, and Summerall and Golish, if you can go 7-5, get to a bowl game, be competitive, and potentially even win that game, fans will feel really, really good. But if you do get to that 8th win, or heaven forbid, somehow you get to 9 or above that, then at that point, the expectations for the following year are going to be really, really high. So I think for both of them, that's kind of where you want to be. And then I guess the bottom of the barrel, because I don't think I'm missing anybody here, but the bottom of the barrel would be Arkansas and Kentucky. I think for Arkansas, you went 2-10 last year. You didn't win a game in conference. Yeah, even if you're 4-8, 5-7, but you win maybe 2 games in the SEC, you feel like, okay, we're getting somewhere. That's not where you want to be, but it's a lot better than where you have been, at least last year. So I think for Arkansas, I mean, 5-7, I feel like that feels like a good kind of number to get back on track for that program in year one with Silverfield, because I just don't think a lot of people have high expectations. I don't have high expectations for Arkansas. I think they're probably the worst team in the conference going into the year. Kentucky's interesting. I don't think this year. I really like Will Stein though. I think he's the kind of guy that coming into Kentucky. I'm not going to be surprised if in 2 or 3 years we're talking about Kentucky as that's like a dark horse. Maybe like South Carolina was last year, right? You don't expect them to make the playoff or anything, but you could see a world where if everything goes right, maybe they win 9 games. Maybe I'll be wrong on that, but I really like the Will Stein hire. So I think for Kentucky, if you're just getting back to 6-6, going to a bowl game, maybe you finish 7-6. I think you would have to feel really good about the direction that you're going in there, because it shows you that, hey, we went and got this young guy, offensive coordinator from Oregon. And especially if Minchie can come in and kind of light it up at quarterback, and you feel like maybe we have something in place here where in year two we're ready to make that jump and maybe get to 8 wins or challenge for something like that. I have to think 6-6 in year one for Kentucky. You feel really good about that. And they have an interesting game early on where, it feels weird saying this. And I don't think that Alabama's going to lose this game. I don't think it's going to be, particularly competitive, but I know a lot of people I talk about in week 2, Kentucky playing Alabama. That's a really good measuring stick for a program, especially if it's an Alabama team. It'll be the first SEC start for whoever their quarterback is. And the expectations maybe not as sky high for that program going into this season, right? If you're Kentucky and not even win that game, but let's say, you lose that game 27-20 or something, and you feel like, wow, we're really not that far away from a team like Alabama that made the playoffs last year and won a game. I think that kind of stuff can really build a lot of momentum within a program like Kentucky. So I'll go 6-6 for Kentucky, and we'll say 5-7 for Arkansas, and even 4-8 for Arkansas. Like you doubled your, I mean, it sucks to say that, but you doubled your wins. So
you kind of talked about the almost moral victory working for a team like Kentucky, but stuff like that's not going to fly. I would say out of Auburn, Florida, LSU. I mean, the reason Hugh Freeze is out of a
no,
job is because he couldn't win the coin toss games. How
yeah,
many times on Monday in a press conference do we hear, we're so close, we're right there, we just
yep.
need one thing to go our way? And it can probably work at Kentucky. I think you're spot on there, but it's not going to work at the higher echelon of programs.
No, and you mentioned LSU. I can't believe I completely forgot about Lane, because he is a SEC coach that's in a new spot. I do think for LSU, you got to make the playoffs.
Right. I mean, with the bag that he got and just the money that they poured into him, the state of Louisiana is backing LSU. And I think for them, like I said, if they don't make the playoffs, I think all hell's going to break loose. It's going to be chaos in Baton Rouge if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, especially and LSU is, they're in the category with, and I mean, we've already seen it happen with Alabama. It hasn't happened to Georgia yet. Happened last year with Texas. Like they're in that category with those teams at the top where, if you went back 5 years, let's say, you're coming off the Joe Burrow year, right? And you knew that you just won a national championship. Maybe you had the best team of all time, or one of them at least. But if you had said, we're going to expand this thing to 12 teams, all the teams I just mentioned, you're going to assume, right, like they're not going to miss the playoffs in a 12-team system, right? Because all you got to do is be a top 10 team, and it's going to happen. And LSU hasn't made a playoff since it's gone to 12 teams. And, they got kind of close. I guess the closest they got was year one under Brian Kelly, where they played for an SEC championship and got blown out by Georgia. But, yeah, I mean, I think for Lane and you got to get back to the postseason. And we don't live in a world anymore where – it's all right, give a coach 3 years. Let him get a couple recruiting classes in here. Let's see what he can build. Let him establish the culture. And you brought up the money that they're spending. I mean, the expectations, I think, for him are easily the highest of any of the first-year coaches, because that's what LSU paid him all that money for. It's to get us back to a playoff and to win national championships. And, I think anything short of, I would even say making the playoffs, but having to win a game or two at the very least, I think that would be a failure in the eyes of a lot of LSU fans.
I think Lane Kiffin is under the most pressure that you can be under without being on the hot seat. And I think
Yeah.
that just, to me, LSU going ahead of this year has 2 or 3 must-win games. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't drop 1 or 2 and still make the playoffs, but I think if you ask the average LSU fan, they would tell you we have to beat Alabama, we have to beat Ole Miss, we have Florida. Just everyone on their schedule, they look at that as Lane Kiffin. You've done it at Ole Miss, you have to do it here. So I think he's
Mhm.
already in a must-win situation to stay off the hot seat before he's even coached a game there. Which
Yeah,
is,
no,
I think,
yeah, it's a weird spot to be in. It is, but again, that's the world we live in. But yeah, no,
mhm.
I agree with what you said 100% there. So we'll see if he can live up to the expectations. Because if there's one thing that Lane knows how to do, it's fall flat on his face when the expectations are high. So
Mhm.
that's kind of why I think LSU is going to be good. I think they'll be a team that's a lot better at the second half of the season than the first half of the season, probably. But yeah, I mean, if you tell me that team goes 9-3, misses the playoff this year, I'm not going to be shocked by that. I think the people are just that's not fair expectations on him necessarily to do what I just said. But when you're spending that much money, that's
Right.
going to be the expectation. So
And especially when you leave the way you do, you leave a playoff bound team, you're expected to go to the playoffs with another team. That's why you leave.
Mhm.
So I think again, not just from an LSU perspective, from a Lane perspective, I think he expects LSU to go to the playoffs as well. And one thing we talked about is the coin flip games, everything being so close in the conference. The last couple seasons we've seen up to the last week, four different teams could make the championship game. And I've
Mhm.
heard a lot of buzz over the past offseason, really the past two seasons. How soon could we see the SEC championship game removed and just abolished? And why? Why would that happen? I know a lot of people are curious about that.
Yeah, in terms of a timeline, I think we're still at least a few years away from that, and a lot of that comes. I mean, Greg Sankey's spoken about that recently, and
Mm.
how much they love their relationship with Mercedes Benz and the Falcons and that whole stadium setup that they have over there, and it's a game that generates millions and millions, tens and tens and tens of. We're getting into the a lot of times with that, like potentially nine figures in terms of how much money that game can bring in in terms of revenue. And yeah, I think eventually it's going to have to go away. And the problem with that is when you have a 9 game conference schedule, like we're going to start having this year in the SEC, the perfect example was last year. And I know Georgia didn't look it when they played Alabama because they beat the brakes off of them. But Georgia was beat up in that game just like Alabama
Mm.
was. And I think we saw that in the college football playoff where, yeah, Alabama went in, they were able to, come back and beat Oklahoma. But then they went to the Indiana game and just got demolished by the best team in the country, right? It is what it is, but they got demolished. And then you saw Georgia. They went in and they played an Ole Miss team that had gotten to sit at home the week before or a couple weeks before when Alabama and Georgia were in Atlanta. And Ole Miss took care of business, right? And so it doesn't benefit the two teams that you're kind of seeing there have to play in that game when you're already going through such a physical and difficult conference schedule. So I do think eventually, and this is something we've talked about on JOX a good bit, is the idea of what if you take the SEC championship and you turn it from 1 game into 2 games? And so, last year, for example, Alabama and Georgia, you kind of get a bye, right? Like you're going to be in the playoff. You're the top 2 teams. Congratulations, going to the playoff. And then you take, 3-6, 4-5 in terms of the conference standings, and you have them play in a semi, kind of play-in game, right, for the college football playoff. And the two winners of that game know they're going to be in. Maybe one of the losers still has an opportunity to get a fifth at-large bid, especially once it expands to 16 or 24, 76, like the basketball tournament eventually is what it seems like we're headed towards at
Right.
some point. But yeah, I do think that game's going to have to go away, and you're going to have to find another way to continue to generate revenue. And my question for that would be, let's say, I was talking to one of my coworkers today about this, and it was okay. Let's say the SEC championship game generates $200 million. All right, you can't just give that money away by getting rid of the game. So let's say you split it up. You have 2 games now, and okay, maybe you're not doubling it to 400 million, but maybe you can turn that into 250 million or $300 million, right? And then everybody kind of wins. So that would be my question for, I guess Greg Sankey and the higher ups in college football is what does that look like from a financial standpoint where it would, if it makes sense to do that, I would think that would be the direction that you go. But it definitely seems, and this isn't just an SEC thing. I think it goes for all the other conferences. I mean, the Big Ten championship this last year was, it was fun. We got to see Indiana, Ohio State, which we all wanted to see. And that was great. But okay, it didn't mean anything, right? In terms of, the college football playoff, like we knew both teams were going to be in, both teams were going to be at worst, like the 1 and the 3 seed. So there's no real suspense there.
Mhm.
You have the Big 12, you got a rematch of a blowout you saw earlier in the year. Guess what? Happened again. Texas Tech smoked BYU, and then Texas Tech got smoked by Oregon. But that's not relevant, I guess. But you saw a rematch of a game that
Right.
we already knew the outcome of, and we saw the same outcome again. Then in the ACC, you had two teams playing in that didn't even make the playoff, right? Duke won it. They didn't have a chance to get in. Virginia, maybe they would have gotten in if they had won it. But then you had Miami, who got to sit at home because of the way the tiebreakers worked, and they went all the way and almost won a national championship. So
Right.
it doesn't really make sense to have those games anymore. But I understand from a financial aspect, you have to find a way to replace that before you're just going to cut them out entirely. But if you were to tell me that 5 years in the future that those games are gone, or it looks like kind of what I was saying with, two matchups for a play-in game or some different type of, playoff or postseason format for the conferences, I wouldn't be shocked.
And it almost seems like the winner does not benefit as much as the loser loses from that game. I can think
Mm-hmm.
just off the top of my head, 2017 Auburn was ranked number 2. Going into the championship week, they get blown out by Georgia. They fall out of the playoffs. If that game's not there, Auburn's in the playoffs. You look at Georgia 2018, Georgia 2019, 2023. I would look at Georgia as well. They were 12-0 going into that game, lose by 3 to Alabama, miss the playoffs entirely.
Yep.
And I think that if Georgia plays in the 2023 playoffs, I think there's a good chance they win it all. I'm not saying that they would have beat Michigan, but I would have loved to see them get a chance. I mean, they beat Florida State by 60, right? So again, what's the value of that game, of the 1 versus 2 in the conference?
Yeah, I think it worked a lot better in the, like a lot of the things you're talking about there. When we had a 4-team playoff, it made a lot more sense.
Mhm.
Because in the ideal world there, right, you have, the 4 conference champions, right, would make the playoff, or, 3 of them would, and then Notre Dame would get in or something like that. But now that you've got a 12 team, and if we're going to keep expanding it, which we are, it's just a matter of time. Yeah, I think that game just loses more and more value. And I was there in Atlanta this past December covering the game for work, and it's just like nobody really even cared. I mean, if anybody listens to the show, who I root for and where I went to school, and I mean, as an Alabama fan being there, like, I mean, it wasn't fun watching my team get demolished by Georgia, but at the same time, it was like, okay, we lost by 21. We're still probably going to be in the playoff. Like, it really doesn't matter. And, for Georgia fans, it was, okay, yeah, we finally beat Alabama, but it didn't mean anything, right? And you still lost in the first round of the playoffs. So it's like, it didn't amount to anything. It's just another game that's on the schedule. And especially when it's a game like that, where we already saw it earlier in the season, it takes a lot of the luster away from it. But I mean, you could have said that, I guess, for a while now, because even before we went to the way that it's split up now, where it's just 1 through 16 in the standings, and that's how they determine things. I mean, go back to okay, Auburn in 2013, right, when they played Missouri, and Missouri made it to back-to-back SEC title games when they entered the conference. Like, nobody thought they were going to win those games, and they didn't, right? I remember there were a lot of times that Florida would get in because they were just the best team in the East that year, and the West was so much better that, like, it was just another game you had to play to get to the real prize, which was playing for a national championship a lot of times for, Auburn that one year, Alabama a number of years. And, you can go back a while to where that game it was just kind of another game on the schedule. And, if you'd seen an upset, yeah, it was crazy, but you never saw an upset, so it didn't really matter. So, it's going to be interesting to see where those go. And I think that narrative's only going to get louder because, I mean, I think we're probably going to be in a similar situation this year with its 12 teams. Like, you're probably not going to have a lot of intrigue around a lot of those games because it's not going to be win or get in. It's going to be, especially in the SEC and the Big Ten, it's, okay, congratulations, you made it here. Don't get hurt. I think that's going to be a lot of it. So, and even the buys, if you get, the teams that win that, you look at the history of the 14 or the 12-team playoff, the teams that get buys, like, doesn't work out very well for them.
Yeah, the only team that's won is Indiana. They're the only team with the bye to have won. And that is insane to me. So kind of one more thing on the SEC topic is kind of the Heisman Trophy, obviously the most coveted award in the sport. Who out of the SEC has the best chance to win that? Obviously, Trinidad Chambliss kind of comes to mind first.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're back in the playoffs, then he's going to have a really, really good opportunity. No doubt about that. I know I said he's the best quarterback coming in, but I think right now, I mean, you probably have to start it with Arch, just because we can say what we want about the award, but if Texas goes and wins the SEC, or they just make the college football playoff and Arch Manning looks like even 80% of the player that he's been projected to be his entire career, people are going to want to give it to him. And I'm not saying that's wrong necessarily, if he earns it on the field, but he's going to have all the buzz going into the season, and I can't really argue against that. So I think him, Trinidad, I mean, it's going to be a quarterback award. So I mean, Gunner, if Georgia's able to get back to the playoffs, I thought he showed a lot of growth last year, and if he can continue to take that next step, that's another guy that I think will be right up there. I think whoever, and they're going to have to make the playoffs as well, but I still think at this point with Alabama, whoever rolls out there at quarterback, I mean, we saw with Ty, halfway through the season last year, he looked like he was going to potentially run away with the award, and then he gets hurt, and we know how the second half of that season went, but I think if whether it's Keelan Russell or Austin Mack, they're going to have a really good opportunity just because of the way that offense is. And I'm not super confident that Alabama's going to be able to run the ball very well again. So they're going to have to play superhero ball like Ty did. And if they can do it for a whole year and not get too banged up, then they're going to have a good chance. Maybe Sam Levitt at LSU. That one kind of depends a lot, I think, on his foot injury and if he's going to miss time at the beginning of the year. And if he does, then, that'll ding him and maybe take him out if he misses a game or two early on to kind of pad those stats and have the same resume as a lot of other guys. I'm trying outside of quarterback. I mean, we mentioned the running backs, Keywan Lacey, I think it again, but that's a situation where it's like, if Ole Miss is in a position where Keywan Lacey could win the Heisman, it's probably because Trinidad's also in a position to win the Heisman, and he's going to get it. Ahmad Hardy's another one at Missouri, but is Missouri going to be good enough? And is he going to put up crazy enough stats to where that could happen? Because he was great last year, but then in SEC play, he wasn't the same player that he was when they played, lower level teams, right? Like lesser competition when he was putting up 200 plus yards a game. So I think those would be two that come to mind. I don't think there's necessarily a receiver that I look out there. I mean, Cam Coleman, maybe if he just goes absolutely bananas, but again, like Arch Manning's going to eat up those votes if they do well. I'd love to sit here and tell you that, Ryan Coleman Williams is going to, come back and be that dude, but, we'll see. I guess he has the talent too, but another situation, quarterback's probably going to eat your votes. So, I think those four quarterbacks are probably the guys, but I think right now, it'd be Arch and Trinidad would definitely be at the top of that as far as the SEC goes. And I think a lot of people right now, if they had to pick a Heisman, would probably give it to Arch.
Right. He's definitely it's a media / quarterback award now, as we've seen. And I love the little clarification you said on Ryan Coleman Williams, because that's what he needs to work on in the offseason is his number and his name. I think other than that, he's good, right? Nothing else he needs to improve. Well,
he got engaged. So he got engaged. So his personal life is, maybe he was distracted trying to court the love of his life last offseason. Right. But if he doesn't drop the ball, I mean, he can be as good as anybody. Just don't catch the ball.
When he gets the ball in his hands, we've seen all the talent in the world. Just the biggest part of being a receiver, catching it. That's really
fundamentals, man.
Yeah. Fundamentals. Well, one more thing before you head out, as I ask each of my guests who come on here, this is kind of a would you rather, or what do you think you have a better chance at? And it's, do you think you have a better chance at hitting a 90-plus mile per hour fastball from an MLB pitcher? Take your pick. Could be Shohei, could be anybody. Mm-hmm. Or return a serve from Roger Federer in pro tennis.
Ooh,
and you can be back in your prime. Like, think of yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're unathletic, just saying, like, back in your 20s, think about, like,
no, it's okay. I'm 30. I can do either of those things. Man, that's tough. See, the second you said 90-mile-an-hour fastball, I was like, no, I'll take the other one, because I don't think people realize how difficult that is to do that haven't done it. But I'd probably go with that one over Federer, because, Federer, what does he serve? Like 140, 140? Oh, God. Yeah, I'm not.
It's bad. Like, at his best, it was like 140.
Yeah, I don't think I can stick my racket out fast enough to be able to do that. So, I'll take the fastball because, at least, back in my high school days, like, I'd see like 92. So if I'm trying to hit 90, I think I'd take my chances on being able to make contact on that. Now, if it was 100-mile-an-hour fastball, that's not happening. But, I'll take my chances with 90, and we'll throw somebody out there that's a little, maybe a little bit older, a little bit past their prime, and they're, gassing it up at 91 or something. I think I could have a much better chance of that than if Federer's 140 or 150. That's not happening.
Right.
No
Right.
way. What about
Yeah.
you?
I just think that in tennis, I mean, the racket's so much bigger. That's
It
my only
is.
thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would say tennis, I would have a better chance because I played both a little bit through my high school years. And I
Mhm.
always found that I was a terrible batter, terrible batter. Couldn't hit anything. So with tennis, I feel like I would return pretty well. But I mean, like I said, that is a fast, fast serve right there. And
See,
it's
that's one of those things
right,
where at least the baseball
man.
one, I can put that into context because I played that. But I mean, me and my wife play tennis, but she's not Roger Federer as much as I love her.
Probably not sending it
I
to 140 plus.
No, but I mean, I've never even seen that like with my own
Oh,
eyes. Like, I think I'd just be so shell shocked, like being on the court with that I'd be like, nah, I just can't do that. At least with the baseball one, like I have seen it before and I know that I could do it once upon a time, not
mhm.
very well, but like, I could go, 1 for 10 or something like that. So
Right.
yeah, that's a good one though. That's a good ponder question.
Maybe put it on Pat Palmer's one of these days.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good
All
one.
right. Well, that just about wraps us up again. Thank you for coming on the show. How can people find you and your show?
Yeah, so I do. So I'm on Jocks here in Birmingham, Alabama. I do a morning show with Damian Mitchell from 6 to 7 weekdays, Monday through Friday, called Morning Jocks. So you can listen in there. I also do. We talked about 3 Man Front 10 to 2. Myself, Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts, and Molly Robinson. We do that weekdays there from 10 to 2. So you can catch me there and on Twitter because that's really the only social media that I use regularly at Conrad VO Radio. So that's where to
Awesome.
find me.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, we appreciate it, of course. You have yourself a great week, Conrad.
Yeah, you too, Wesley. Thank you, man.
Awesome.
Guest of the week.
And as always, a big thank you to our guest. Thank you, Conrad, for coming on today. Make sure you go and listen to Jocks each and every weekday, multiple shows that go on, Mac and Cube in the morning, and then go watch 3 Man Front in the afternoon, followed by Paul Feinbaum, everyone's favorite. And that's going to wrap it up for today's Home Field Advantage podcast episode. I'm your host, Wesley Holmes. Y'all have a great week.